Welcome to the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. My name is Brad Nadalt. It's great to have you with us today, and I've got Lindsay Parry with us. Lindsay, nice to touch base once again. This is episode 2 of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast, and feedback after episode 1 was pretty good. We haven't been fired, or haven't fired ourselves, I should say, but nice to be back. Are you well?
Yeah, I am, and it's always fabulous answering questions from our community, spreading the love a little bit because we can always learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are letting the cat out of the bag a little bit. Obviously, last week we spoke a little bit about proprioception. It was a deep dive on a specific topic. This week we're doing a Q&A episode. So if you have any specific questions about running or strength training for runners over 50, what you can do is click on the link in the description of this podcast and video. We've taken the first few questions out of our community, out of the forums on the Coach Parry app, but ideally what we are going to do going forward is take listener questions, and we are going to give you the opportunity to either ask it in written form, so you can type us a little question, or you can leave us an audio message, or ideally leave us a video question. We're going to filter the video questions to the top of the queue. I'm sure we're going to get lots of questions, so if you want your question answered on this podcast, please make sure you leave us a video question, because those ones are going to be bumped to the top, because we would like to use video on all of these podcasts. So, Lindsay, let's jump straight into the first question, and it's got to do with heart rate. I mean, we talk about heart rate lots here at CoachParry.com, and this one was posted by Barney. Barney says, my threshold heart rate is 133 beats per minute, so zone 2 for a long run would be a heart rate of between 106 and 113 beats per minute. I'm following a plan for a sub 5:30 marathon. It's a 4-day plan, and it calls for a long run pace of 13 minutes per mile. My recent long run of 15 miles resulted in heart rates that increased mileage at a constant pace of 13 minutes per mile. He basically, what he's saying is his heart rate just climbed and climbed and climbed the further he went in the run. His pace is constant, but his heart rate was rising well above zone 2, ending up near his threshold heart rate of 133, although his perceived effort rises, or his perceived effort also rises along with that heart rate. This rising heart rate is typical of my long runs. This is so difficult to understand how to train. If I try to maintain a zone 2 heart rate, it would have been continuously slowing down my pace much below the plan of 13 minutes per mile. Is this continuously rising heart rate a very unusual pattern in runners? And how do I adjust my training plan with these sorts of issues? Let's talk about a rising heart rate, or let's probably take a step back. Is that the right heart rate zone to be targeting on these long runs? What's the best sort of way to go about it? Are we talking 180 minus age, 220 minus age? What's the deal?
Yeah, so, and I think that, yeah, there are two bits to unpack there before we actually dive into answering the question for Barney specifically. And that the first place always is to start with, are we addressing threshold? And therefore, are we calculating our zone 2 or easy run or aerobic zone off of the right number? Okay, so obviously this is from someone in our community, so we know that Barney used 180 minus age, and that is a formula that was popularized by Phil Maffetone, and it certainly has its place, and it works, and it really is there to ensure that you are well below threshold. So that's ultimately the target of that, is to go well below threshold. Yeah, and typically at Coach Parry in the over 50 population, what we found is that firstly 190 minus age is more appropriate for helping you to establish that zone 2. But also, if we have had someone in our community, or if you have been training consistently for the past 6 to 12 weeks, 3 months is ideal, then we can do a quite simple test to ensure that we're actually getting in and around the threshold number. And that's important, is because it doesn't have to be an exact number. In fact, threshold, it's a transitional threshold. So it's a point at which we are moving from predominantly aerobic into increasingly anaerobic energy metabolism. And so that is a gray line. So if we are out by 3-4 beats per minute on heart rate, using that number to then calculate our zone 2, it's not going to be catastrophic in any way. and it's still a very useful number. So we always want to start there and go, right, is it a calculated number? Is it an estimated number? How did we get to that number? And really, threshold is your maximum intensity that you can hold for between 30 and 40 minutes of exercise. That's a broad range, and it typically is linked to the definition around it. Your traditional definition really is 30 minutes. And so for a lot of people that are 5K all-out effort in a time trial, say, if that took you 20 minutes to 40 minutes, we could then use that information to help recommend pretty close to where your threshold is, and then we will take 70 to maximum 85% of that threshold will then constitute your zone 2. So assuming that Barney's threshold isn't too bad and it's calculated, and in this instance, it's not really his threshold, that's the issue. Let's look at number 2, and he does ask the question, is this normal? So cardiac drift is normal, and as we exercise for a prolonged period of time, that cardiac drift can become quite marked and significant. Okay? It typically starts around 45 to 60 minutes into exercise. We get this slight uptick in heart rate that is not linked to increasing intensity of exercise. And it is quite gradual but noticeable from about an hour. And somewhere around 2.5 to 3 hours, it really can become quite marked. And in some instances, it does lead to an increased perception of intensity. Okay, and we'll treat these in 2 different ways. So in terms of practically, or let me half a step back, what causes cardiac drift? So the main driver behind cardiac drift is quite simply the fact that as we exercise, we sweat. Our blood is probably our biggest storage of water in the human body. And so when we sweat, our blood volume actually starts to decrease. So you can think now that, and I'm making these numbers up, so please don't think this has got any relevance to how much blood you've actually got or should have, importantly. But let's say you've got 10 liters of blood that is circulating around the body, and you lose 1 kilogram of fluids from your body in an hour of exercise. You've now got 9 liters of fluid that still has to move through exactly the same places and deliver oxygen and energy to the working muscles and remove the byproducts of energy metabolism from the muscles, take to the lungs, etc., and get rid of it. And when we get to 3 hours, you've got 7 liters of blood to do the same amounts of work that you may have had 10 liters at the start. And so it's literally just a question of capacity, that the heart rate needs to go up a little higher because it's got to move that lower volume of blood around faster so that it can do or deliver the same amount of product. And that is exactly what happens with cardiac drift. Now, as we get fitter, cardiac drift does become slightly less gradual. In other words, just the efficiency of everything that you do improves to the point that there's still cardiac drift, but it is more gradual. And then we have secondary factors that influence that cardiac drift, and those will be environmental factors. So is it hot? Is it hot and humid, for example? So what environmental factors are happening that can either increase or slightly decrease that cardiac drift? In ideal temperatures, you will sweat less, so your blood volume will decrease slower, and therefore that cardiac drift will also be slower. Very hot, very humid, you will lose maximum amount of fluids, and therefore you will have this cardiac drift that'll just accelerate. So now how do we use that information? So for the bulk of the population where that cardiac drift is fairly standard. It happens maybe slightly fast or slow, but the principle will be the same. We can use the first 30 to 40 minutes of exercise to set the pace for that intensity, or using our heart rate to set the pace for that long run. And then that's the pace that you will maintain through the run, even when you're getting that cardiac drift, unless you start to perceive the intensity is starting to drive up. And again, that can be a response to fitness. It can be a response to environmental factors. But at that point of time, you then need to adjust your pace, not necessarily in response to the increasing heart rate, but in response to how you are feeling. So as soon as you feel that perception of effort is starting to match or climb with the heart rate, you will introduce more regular walk breaks or simply slow down the pace that you are running at. And in answer to the question around how do I maintain the 13-minute miles, the answer is you don't. Okay. So the reason why training to heart rate with accurate heart rate is better than training to a calculated pace is that the heart rate literally is giving you a snapshot of what is happening inside. And so it's better to set your intensity on the heart rate. Okay. Then we can start to ignore heart rate as the cardiac drift goes. But once perception of intensity goes up, we will then want to drop the pace again. And the quickest way to get yourself to a point where both your fitness and ability actually allow you to match that prescribed pace for the goal target that you are training for is to train for where you are now and not where you want to be. So that's why heart rate is better to use for intensity on easy and long runs, because it makes sure that the intensity is right for you as an individual, whereas the prescription of the pace is a pace based on where we think you are now, but it can be a little less accurate than using your heart rate.
Love that. Great question as well. Let me just whack myself back on. There we go. Lindsay, next question also from our community, from Jackie. Jackie saying, I've noticed that whenever I start a run for the first 200 to 300 meters, I feel like I've just done a sprint finish, breathing all out of sync, legs feel like they're full of lactic acid, mentally thinking I'm going to have to stop. It's painful and I'm not doing something I used to. I've tried different paces to see if it's because I'm going off too fast. Different terrains also noted. Tried flat surfaces, still the same. I push on for about 1 to 2 kilometers and I get into a better place and my body feels more comfortable. It's a new sensation for me. I've always been able to start okay. Is this a fitness issue? Is it normal in older runners? And do I just have to adapt? What's happening with Jackie's initial 200 to 300 meters of each run? If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsay and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
So, look, it's not normal. It's not unheard of to have people that set off on a run and have a very short-term spike in heart rate, which in turn can also then drive the respiratory response, which makes you feel slightly breathless. That doesn't normally last for 2 to 3 kilometers or miles into the run before it settles down. So that's the first thing, is that there can be, at the onset of exercise, this sort of overstimulation, I guess, and therefore like feeling a little bit out of whack. But that typically doesn't then tie into this feeling of having muscles that are flooding with acidosis. It's not lactic acid, just by the way, that feeling that you have when you really push yourself too hard. So that firstly is not a normal response, and I haven't heard many people at all, if anybody, suffer from that unless they do start a run way too fast. Okay. The next thing that always kind of gets not the alarm bells ticking, but gets the thoughts going, like, this is new. So this is not a new runner that's experiencing a symptom. This is a fairly experienced runner that has got a new symptom. And so that always should lead us to ask questions about why and what is causing it. There's already been a good process followed to go, okay, well, maybe it's because I need a little bit longer to warm up as I'm getting older, or maybe I've taken a break and I need to get back to a certain level of fitness. But another key thing there for me is that you can go from feeling really out of sorts and as if you're pushing yourself almost to maximum to feeling quite good without changing much. So there's definitely something at play there. And it could be very little, and it could be like early warning signs of some sort of development of cardiac disease. Anything, as simple as like a stenosis or thin narrowing of arteries, a reduction in the compliance of those arteries. So maybe they are opening much slower. So at the beginning, maybe there's some sort of restriction to kind of peripheral blood pressure resistance. So there's a lot of different cardiac things, I guess, in short, that could be potentially at play. This doesn't at all mean that there is something like that going on. However, there's enough there that I would go and get checked out and just make sure that it's nothing along those lines and that there isn't anything to be concerned about. You have tried different intensities, but where I'm kind of wondering is there room for like a very low intensity start? For example, a walk. So you walk for 5 to 10 minutes, increasing the briskness of that walk and stopping before you physically run to do some like mobility stuff and to just get a little bit of neuromuscular stimulation going, and then going into a run and seeing if that makes a difference at all to how you then start. But I am a little bit concerned at both the extreme feeling of that fatigue and the breathlessness. So this is that one case where I would recommend going and having a good checkup, making sure that there isn't an iron issue, a thyroid issue, so like I said, there's a lot of things that can cause these kind of symptoms, and some of them, because you are otherwise healthy, could be almost just a delay, but they may progress over time, and then it won't get better in that after that 15 to 20 minutes.
Great question, Jackie. Thank you very much for that. Don't forget, if you have a question you'd like answered, make sure you click on the link that's with this podcast and video. You can submit your question there for Lindsay to answer as well. And as I said at the top of this podcast, the video ones get floated to the top. We love those. So please do ask your question via video. Super easy to do. You can do it on your web browser or on your phone. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Question in from Sitska. Lindsay, Sitska says, I'm on a 4:30 marathon training plan. By and large, things are going okay on the training front. I'm feeling fine, have improved my overall fitness, and am able to see modest progress in my running times. The one thing that stresses me out a little are the easy and long runs. I'm sticking to the pace recommended, walk a minute every 4 to 6 Ks, and generally run at on a reasonably flat terrain. Almost without fail, my Garmin tells me I will have had a threshold run, my recovery needs are high, and I need not run for another 40 hours or so, which messes up my training schedule. Sometimes I listen to the watch, sometimes I don't. Am I overdoing it? Should I do something differently? By the way, I don't think I've set up my threshold pace on my watch. When I did a threshold type run, which was an hour and 25 minutes, did 9.33 miles at 9:07 minutes per mile. Average heart rate was 161. Should we be listening to our watch, Lindsay? Let's talk about are these easy runs feeling easy enough according to the Garmin, and is Sietske doing the right thing?
Yeah, so loads of things to unpack there. And she did stipulate that it is a Garmin, so it in some ways makes it slightly easier to answer, because with Garmin, it has a algorithm to automatically calculate threshold, heart rate, and pace. And so it can be quite different to the reality of the situation, and therefore there can be, it's like method marks when we were at school. If you made a mistake early, but then you followed the rest of the things quite well, they still gave you marks. Well, the same thing applies here, is that if there's a mistake made early, that error carries all the way through. And then that means that your recommendations that are coming from your watch are not going to be particularly good. I also find that there's quite an off key, and this is for general GPS devices and not just for Garmin, that there is a disconnect around volume, intensity, and I often find, like, my very hard training sessions, which are quite short but exhausting, and I do need 2 days to recover from them, have a disproportionately short recovery recommendation. Last week, my watch told me I only needed a couple of hours to recover from my high intensity session, but that when I did a longer run later in the week, that I needed 2.5 days to recover from that. And I can assure you that the long easy run was way easier and the effects on my body was way lower. So we do need to get back to, how do I feel? Okay, the watch is trying to make decisions based on variables that it is looking at. And yeah, sometimes I feel like the duration in particular is the one thing that kind of throws the thing out completely. And so if you are feeling like you can hold a robust conversation, if you are feeling really good during that long run, if at the end of the long run you are not exhausted, and you should always feel like you can run a little bit more towards the end of a long run, and if you're walking around the next day and your legs feel pretty good, then you've done that long run easy enough. And the watch has perhaps exaggerated the intensity both on the volume, but earlier on in the call, we were talking about this phenomenon of cardiac drift. So if your cardiac drift is quite marked, that the watch and the algorithm in the watch has no way of differentiating between your heart rate is 160 because you've been running for 3 hours, and your heart rate is 160 because you are pushing yourself really hard. And so then when it combines that high heart rate with 3 hours of exercise, it's going to almost recommend your recovery as if you've run a race. So you do need to then look at yourself and go, how do I feel? How have I recovered? And if the answer to those questions is, I felt good, I felt like I could do more, I feel good now, I feel good when I get up in the morning, then you can ignore the advice from your watch. If, however, you are getting to the end of the workout a bit pooped, you have to sleep every weekend after your long run, you can't function unless you sleep for 2 hours. And then when you're walking around the next day, you are feeling quite tired and stairs are a little bit of an effort, then you need to slow down those long runs.
Yeah, I remember when I was training for my first Ironman, Lindsay, those sort of suggestions from the watch. I'm surprised the watch just said or didn't say I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore, because I mean, it just built and built and built, and I felt great, but the watch was screaming at me, telling me to take weeks off. Sometimes you just got to, you know your body better than the watch, I think, at times. So that's what you need to do. Great questions today, Lindsay, as always. I love doing these podcasts. Don't forget, if you have any questions, what you can do is just click on the link that is with this episode, either on YouTube, you can do it in the description, or if you're listening on whatever podcast player you're on, there'll be a link there too. You can submit your question, and as I said, the video questions get filtered to the top of the queue, and we answer those ones first. So until next time, from myself, Brad Nadalt, and Lindsay Parry, thank you so much for listening to the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. We look forward to catching up again next time. Cheers.